All right, welcome everybody. My name is Andrew Zimdahl. I'm here with my partner Julian, and we are the two founding members of Honeydew Energy Advisors. And we are here tonight to talk about the building energy performance standards. And this is going to have a special focus for members of condos, boards, and co-ops. Thank you again for joining us. We're going to jump right in here. So this is a schedule of what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to start talking about benchmarking of utility data, how that relates to the building energy performance standards. We're going to move into the various ways that you can comply with these new regulations. We're going to talk about the penalties if you are unable to comply or you partially comply. And then we're talking about how to improve your Energy Star score, your building's energy performance. And then we're going to conclude the presentation by speaking about the impact that a solar energy system can have on your Energy Star score, which will help you comply with BEPS. And with that, I will turn it over to Julian for the benchmarking overview.
Great, thank you, AZ. So real quick, I'm sure that a lot of you guys have heard about benchmarking, or some of you might have done it yourself. We're going to do a quick summary about what it's about and how you come up with your Energy Star score. So there's a program actually provided by the EPA, so it's used nationwide, called Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And in this program, you enter your building's characteristics. So that's the size of your building, the square footage, the different space types, number of units, number of bedrooms, percentage of the building that's heated and cooled, so on and so forth. And then you also put the previous year's utility data. That includes energy, electricity, gas, and water. Once you put that information in and you've completed it, it will spit out a score that represents how efficient your building is compared to other buildings of the same size. If you received a low score close to 1, then your building is very inefficient. If you've received a higher score up to 100, then your building is considered very efficient. Now there's another score that it generates. It's called an energy usage intensity, or what we're going to be calling it from now on an EUI. And that's essentially your energy usage, your electric and gas usage total for the entire building divided by the building area. Since we are talking to condos and co-ops, I think it's very important that you know that this is your entire building's usage, not just the common areas. You have to include each individual unit's electricity, gas, and water consumption. Now, if you are curious about your score, you can always visit energybenchmarkingdc.org, and it will show you your most recent score. Or if you've done benchmarking through Honeydew, we can always inform you about that as well and go through that. Now, for the different deadlines, right? So there are different groups when it comes to benchmarking. The first group is buildings above 50,000 square feet. They've been required to benchmark since April 1st, 2014, using 2013 data. And it's an ongoing program every single year, due by April 1st. For buildings above 25,000 square feet and below 50,000 square feet, those buildings will be required to benchmark starting next year by April 1st. And then for buildings above 10,000 square feet and below 25,000 square feet, they will be required to benchmark in 2025. I know it seems like a long way, but I thought 2022 was a long way. So, and we're there now. So definitely want to prepare for that. Now, something that's very important also is you will be required to hire a certified engineer, third party. It cannot be the same company that does your benchmarking, to verify all of the data. And that includes verifying your square footage, because a lot of the data out there is inaccurate, making sure that your benchmarking report is as accurate as possible. For buildings 25,000 square feet and above, that includes the first tranche of buildings as well, 50,000 square feet and above, that year that you have to perform the verification process is 2024. So that is coming up. And then for the smaller tranche of buildings, that won't be until 2027. So we do have some time for that.
And I would just caution you, don't wait until the last minute to do this, because all the buildings are going to be forced to comply at the same time. And there's going to be kind of a mad rush to get these services in. So it's better to do this sooner rather than later.
Great. So for the BEPS program, Building Energy Performance Standards, I'm sure a lot of you guys have either received a letter, that's why you're here, or you just heard about the program and you're curious about what it is. BEPS stands for Building Energy Performance Standards. This was introduced through the Clean Energy DC Omnibus Act of 2018. And in that bill, originally or initially, the goal was to bring DC to full renewables by 2032, but also included in there is making sure that buildings in DC are as efficient as possible, right? And in order to do so, they've created the BEPS program, which is going to require inefficient buildings to improve their efficiency over a 5-year cycle. And this cycle is going to continue every 5 years until you've hit that standard score. Now, how do you know if you're subject to this program? You just have to check your 2019 Energy Star score and make sure that it is above the DC median Energy Star score for your property type, right? We'll get into what the median scores are for all the different property types in a little bit. But if you do fall below that score, then you will be subject to BEPS and you will be required to comply over a 5-year compliance cycle. Now, here's a list of all the different buildings and their median scores. Really, we're only focusing on one today, since I'm assuming these are all associations that have joined, and that's for multifamily buildings. The multifamily median Energy Star score in DC is a 66. So if your 2019 score falls below that, you will be subject to BEPS. If it falls above it, then you're fine. We do recommend that if you do have a score of 66 through around 70, you are risking falling below that score in the next round. So we do recommend you still look into making some improvements to your building to make sure that you will not have to be subject to BEPS in the near future. Now, regarding the schedule, the first tranche of buildings, just like for benchmarking, right? Same tranche of buildings, 50,000 square feet buildings and above are required to comply to BEPS starting on January 1st this year, right? So this is very important that you are all aware about this program and that you begin taking steps. And you do have a 5-year compliance cycle. So they're going to be reviewing what your score was from 2026 to make sure that you've complied. For the next tranche below that, 25,000 to 50,000 square feet, they don't have to begin the BEPS program until 2027, and then 10,000 square feet and above, 2033. So there's plenty of time for that group of buildings, but again, always great to prepare in advance.
And it's also important to note that even if you complete your first compliance cycle, there's a second compliance cycle after that. So once we get into 5 years from now in 2026, 2027, they're going to reevaluate all the scores. The BEPS standard may change. So maybe in the previous cycle, you were exempt from BEPS, and in a subsequent cycle, you're going to have to make some improvements as you'll be subject, as hopefully the buildings in DC, the general building stock will improve in its efficiency. So the program in DC is pretty mature. It has been recently introduced into Montgomery County, Maryland, and I don't know how many folks here calling in from Maryland, but these regulations are going to be finalized next year in June. And this is all going to be based upon the energy usage intensity, again, the EUI. And the fines, the penalties are not as severe in Montgomery County as they are here, though they could change by the time they finalize. And they're going to have 4-year compliance cycles over there. So they're going to have a gradually declining level of EUI, because remember, the higher the EUI, that means the more energy your building consumes and the less efficient it is. So they're going to be on 4-year cycles, and it's going to be similar to what the DC's tranches are. They're going to start out at only buildings over 250,000 square feet, and that's going to start in 2026. And they're also going to use buildings over 50,000 square feet, just using a different year for data beginning that same year in 2026. And then, as you can see, there'll be 4-year cycles until you get to your final deadline in 2034. And then again, they're going to lower that standard into the 30s. It's kind of funny to talk about the 30s in the future sense, but here we are in the 20s. So that's Montgomery County, Maryland. Again, the regulations are going to be finalized in June, and we're going to come back with an update on that for our Montgomery County clients. Next, I'm going to turn it back to Julian to talk about the compliance pathways. And now we're going to go back into DC.
And I was on mute. Great. So there are really 4 different pathways you can choose from, 2 of which are going to be the most popular. I'll get started with the performance pathway. So if you have a very low Energy Star score, right, and you don't think you'll be able to make it to the 66, the most likely option that you would choose is the performance pathway, because all you need to do here is reduce your EUI by 20%. So essentially, your total electric and gas consumption for the entire building, reduce that by 20% over the 5-year cycle. The next one, the standard target pathway, this one's pretty simple. You just have to reach the standard score, which is a 66 for multifamily buildings. If you are above the national median is always 50. So if you're around 50 through 66, or even if you have a lower score, but you do plan on replacing your HVAC system or something like that, and you know that'll jump your score up above a 66, then this would be the best option for you. Now, for the prescriptive pathway, this is similar to the performance pathway, where you have to reduce your usage by a certain percentage. However, they're not going to be grading you by the percentage that you've decreased. They're going to be creating a point-based system, right, and valuing each energy conservation measure or any energy efficiency improvement. They're going to be valuing it by points, right? And you need to reach a certain amount of points, a total of 25 points in order to comply. They're not going to look at the reduction. They're just going to confirm that you've actually implemented these energy conservation measures. This is a better option for those that need more certainty. However, this is a much longer process, and there's a lot more work involved. For example, first you have to agree with DOE on which projects that you're going to work on in order to reduce about 25% of your total energy usage. Then once you've agreed on that, you have to share which contractors you're going to be working with. Then once you implemented the project, you have to measure and verify your savings, so on and so forth. So there are a lot more steps in the prescriptive pathway than the performance pathway. But again, for those that need more certainty and really need to know that they will comply, this may be a better option for them. And then the last one, alternative compliance pathway. This is more of a custom plan determined by the DOE. This is best for buildings that have had benchmarking issues, that are going through deep retrofits, those that want to go above and beyond, and other special circumstances. This is also used if, so I'm going to back up just a little bit. Originally, they wanted to get the median score of your 2018 and 2019 Energy Star score and use that as the baseline. For those that don't have accurate 2018 data, and that's because these days the utilities aren't able to provide you with that information and that data, you can go through the alternative compliance pathway in order to pretty much apply for a variance so that you only use your 2019 score as the baseline. That's a mouthful. It's a lot to understand. However, if you do work with us through this process, we will explain it in more detail and make sure that you understand that process and help you throughout the process as well.
Yeah, just to kind of recap. So what this program is doing is just saying, what did you use in 2018 and 2019? And what will you use in 2025? And if you're in the performance pathway, and if the 2025 number for EUI is 20% lower, then you've complied and you don't have to pay any of these penalties. And so let's talk about these penalties. The general formula for penalties in BEPS is the fine is going to equal $10 per square foot, rounded down to the nearest $100,000. So here you can see we have some examples. If you've got a big building over 700,000 square feet, you could be subject to a $7.4 million fine if you do nothing. And it is very important. You can see at the bottom, if you do something, you'll get your penalties reduced. And of course, it's better to reduce your penalty than to do nothing at all and be subject to these maximum penalties. So smaller buildings that won't be subject to BEPS until later in this decade, you could still be looking at a $100,000 fine, which is a lot of money for a building that size for sure. It's also important to notice that if you're close to the standard, if you're already like a 64 or 65, they're going to pre-adjust that penalty. So if you're already in the 60s, you're never going to have to pay the maximum penalty, even if you do nothing. Now, that being said, if you are under the median, I still recommend you do something because it's still not good to pay a fine. And it's always better to have a more efficient building because that helps in your operating budget, even if you are already complying. So how are the penalties reduced? This slide goes over that. So for example, with the performance pathway, the goal for the performance pathway is to reduce your energy usage intensity by 20%. So if you only reduce your EUI by 10% for your 2025 data, then you would pay 50% of whatever that maximum penalty is. For the standard target pathway, remember the goal for the standard target is to get to the median Energy Star score. So if you narrow that gap between where you're at in 2018, 2019 to where you get to in 2025, if you narrow that gap by 25%, then you'd be paying 75% of the maximum fine. For the prescriptive pathway, as Julian mentioned, this is a point-based system. So if they figure out that you need 25 points to comply and you've implemented 12 of those 25 points, that's 48%. So you would only be subject to 48% of whatever that maximum penalty is as it's applied in 2026. And for the alternative compliance pathway, if you're one of those special cases, DOEE is still working on what that would look like. But if you're just on the alternative compliance pathway because you don't have good 2018 benchmarking data, for example, then it's going to be the same formula if you're on the performance pathway or the standard target pathway. You're just going to have a variance. You're just going to have a different baseline. Technically, you'll be on the alternative compliance pathway, but really you're going to be acting as if you're on the performance or the standard target pathway. So we've talked about the program, the penalties, who's going to be subject to it, but now let's actually talk about what you can do to improve your building's energy performance. And really the first step in doing that is diagnosing the present conditions of your building, which is done through an energy audit. And we recommend that every building get an ASHRAE level 2 audit. There are 3 levels of audits. And the ASHRAE level 2, it's going to, again, document the building conditions. It's going to give you a nice pie chart showing which of your building systems are using how much energy each year. It's also going to make recommendations for ECMs, which are energy conservation measures, or building improvements that help your building's energy performance. It's going to show you, give you a menu of different ECMs you can take, and it's also going to show you how that's going to impact both your energy usage intensity and your Energy Star score. And it also provides some basic financial analysis so you can look at the return on investment and how much it's going to help out in your operating budget. And then finally, the next, if you want to go a step further, you can actually create if you have a complex, larger building, you could actually create an energy model that will model your building system, so you can see how those different systems will interact with one another. But that's usually only best, again, for larger buildings. If you've got a small to mid-sized building, you probably don't need an energy model to really get a good grasp of how the ECMs will affect your Energy Star score. So we're going to go over now some common things that you'll see in an energy audit. And these are the easiest things that you can implement. These are low cost to no cost solutions. The first, we always recommend you look into doing a solar power purchase agreement. And for those not familiar with this, it's commonly referred to by its initials of PPA. And this is where your building will get solar panels at no cost to the building. They don't have to pay to maintain the system. It'll be built and engineered by a third party who will own that system and maintain it for you. And then they'll sell you the energy at a rate that's typically much lower than what Pepco is offering, and can often be as low as 0 cents. So the solar PPA is really good for folks on the standard target pathway, because solar can really help to increase your Energy Star score. Now, the little caveat is it doesn't actually reduce your energy usage intensity, because you're still using the same amount of energy. It's just coming from a cleaner source. So again, the solar PPA is really great for people on the standard target pathway, not so helpful on the performance pathway, unless you look at it from the standpoint that it's saving you a lot of money, or sometimes giving you some money up front to pay for other energy efficiency improvements. LED lighting has been a big revolution in the lighting industry. LEDs use about half the amount of energy as fluorescents, and sometimes as much as 90% less energy than incandescent lighting. You can also look at your nighttime loads. Are you cooling your hallways to 65 degrees in the middle of the night when nobody's there? Are you keeping lighting on when nobody's using it? You can install motion sensors. That type of thing is good to look at, making sure you don't have a lot of phantom loads, a lot of appliances being plugged in and drawing energy even though you're not using them. Related to that, optimizing startup, power down, more helpful in industrial commercial settings, but it can also be looked at in the energy audit. And then you can also help implement a culture of energy conservation within your community. I can't tell you how many times I've heard of cases in which somebody had a leaky toilet in their unit and they didn't do anything about it for a month. And if you have a shared water bill, then everybody's paying for that. Likewise, people leave their air conditioning on when they go away for the weekend. Little things like that, if you get people thinking about it and conscientious about it, that can make a big difference. And then chilled water reset for keeping your hot water. You can reset that chilled water for depending on the season. You're going to raise that in the summer and lower that in the winter. These are some mid to high level improvements. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about these, as they won't be applicable to everybody. But these are some really good ways to dramatically change your Energy Star score. Things like variable speed drives, putting on the motors in your different systems. The VRF is a variable refrigerant flow system. This is a very high efficient HVAC system that we're working on a project currently in Lanier Heights that's going to pretty much single-handedly bring them from one of the least efficient buildings to one of the most efficient buildings in their neighborhood. We can also look at boiler upgrades, chiller replacements, combined heat and power. We can do energy information systems, smart thermostats, that kind of thing. And also look at windows and retro commissioning some older HVAC equipment in your building. So I have here some examples on an audit that we completed a few months ago. I'm going to reiterate that this is going to be different for everybody's building, so don't expect this to be a one-size-fits-all solution. But this is what we saw for a condo building. I think there's about 50 units in this building, older building in Lanier Heights. LED lighting would be $11,000 investment, pays for itself in 2 years, and the lighting will last 10, 15 years. That would improve the Energy Star score by 9. Install window films. little bit more of an investment, not quite as big of a payoff, but if you need to get that there, it's still a reasonable level for investment. Looking at low flow fixtures, this is really only relevant for sinks and showers especially, because it's really only hot water that's going to affect your Energy Star score, because that's what you're using your either your natural gas or electric for. It's not really looking at the amount of cold water or the sewer water that you're emitting. And then finally, the VRF system was estimated at $960,000. We actually found a solution for them for $750,000 in our competitive sourcing. This is a 14-year payback, so it's a long payback period. But if you need to, change out your boiler in the near term anyway, it certainly makes sense, especially when you look at the dramatic impact that it can make in your Energy Star score. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Julian to do some analysis on how solar can affect your Energy Star score.
Right, thanks, AZ. So we took 4 different examples on buildings we're working with. We took their system sizes, the percentage that the system's offsetting from the building's energy usage, their original score, how much it's impacted their Energy Star score, and then also to show you how, unfortunately, solar doesn't affect the EUI score for the performance pathway, but there are other benefits that it can come with, even if you do choose the performance pathway. So first, we'll look at a 126 kilowatt system. This is slightly large for a typical building in DC. The system will offset 19% of the total electricity usage in the building. Their score is going to jump from a 48 to a 64, right? If they chose the standard target pathway. Just by looking at that, we know that this is going to be the best solution for them. And all they need to do is one smaller project, maybe switch to LED lights or something similar to that to just jump right above a 66 and comply. And as you can see, the EUI score did not change. Now, for a 92 kilowatt system, that's offsetting 11% of the total electricity usage. And I'm going to compare this with the one on the bottom, the 72 kilowatt system, that's also offsetting around 11% at 10%. If you compare those two, you can see that there's actually just the same amount of the jump in the score for Energy Star score. Right, so it'll go from a 60 to 69 for the 92 kilowatt system and a 26 to a 35 for a 72 kilowatt system, right? So those are similar, but then you look at the third one, 124 kilowatt system, offsetting the same around 10%, but that's only jumped by 4 points. We tried figuring out why there wasn't as much of an impact. That's because that building is actually using more gas than electricity, and they are facing issues on the gas side when it comes to over usage. So now, as I mentioned before, if you're connecting a system to your meter, it will affect your Energy Star score, but not your EUI score. However, the same as AZ mentioned with the power purchase agreements, there are also roof leases where a solar company will rent the space on your roof for a solar array and provide you with either cash up front or an annual roof lease. And with that money, you can put that towards another project that will reduce your EUI score if you do decide to go down the performance pathway. So solar companies are providing money up front that can help contribute to other energy conservation measures in your building. In fact, the building that AZ mentioned just earlier, where we're replacing their HVAC system with the VRF system, they're also going to be installing solar and receive money up front to help cover that additional cost. So if you do have room for solar, roofs in DC are golden, and you definitely want to take that opportunity to either improve your Energy Star score or receive funds in order to invest in other energy conservation measures.
Yeah, we're really excited about this VRF project that we're combining with solar, because we're going to completely remove this building from needing to use natural gas. And we're getting the 0-cent power purchase agreement. So many of you have been following the natural gas market may know that the prices have increased for natural gas by 180%. So we're going to replace the old boiler system that uses expensive natural gas with a high efficiency VRF system that's going to be run on 0 cent kilowatt hours electricity, 100% renewable energy. And that's very important because they need to secure financing. And the DC Green Bank has been our partner for this. And this is what allows their numbers to pan out and the project to pay for themselves. And I'm also just going to reiterate, we can use some jargon here. When we talk about total electric offset on this table, that means that the solar energy system in that first example will generate 19% of the total electricity that building used at the start point. And you may have energy efficient measures, so that would change the mix, but that's what we mean by total electric offset.
Great. So we created a checklist that you can always bring back to your board, really to prepare you for the BEPS program. So the first step, you want to double check your energy benchmarking data. And I know Aman asked the question, is the data entered on the energybenchmarkingdc.org website audited or verified? That's actually a good question because we've been doing benchmarking for a lot of buildings, and sometimes we'll see that the score on the website is not accurate because we recently made a change to it and they didn't update it on the website. So I would say don't rely on that fully. If you do want to confirm, you can always come to us, and at no cost, obviously, we would review that. So we would just ask whoever benchmarked your building to share the report with us, and we'll confirm what your 2019 score was. Now, the next step would be to compare your 2019 scores to the 2018 median score. So for you guys, that's the 66 for multifamily buildings. So making sure if you fall below or above, then move on to get an on-site energy audit. An ASHRAE level 2 is what we recommend. Begin to identify those low-hanging fruits and energy efficiency measures that you'll find on the report. And this part's very important, right? And this might be one of the first things you want to do as a board is create an internal team or committee to start aligning the energy actions. So this is not going to be an easy project. You definitely want to at least assign one person to this who will be communicating with the contractors, the energy auditor if needed, and really make sure that you are on track to compliance because no one wants to get hit with those penalties. Like AZ mentioned, engage with building residents, maybe schedule a building-wide meeting once you've had a grasp on the program, you understand where you are, and you understand the steps that you need to take to compliance. Schedule that building-wide meeting and explain the process to everybody and really ask for their help when it comes to energy conservation. With the examples that AZ brought up, maybe don't open your window when your heat's blasting and you're working in your room, which I'm guilty of and I no longer do. And then at the end, start developing a strategic energy management plan. AZ, if you go to the next slide, these are pretty much things that we can help your association with. We don't charge for our BEPS consulting services, and I'll review those services right now. So first, we review your benchmarking report and make sure that all the data is being reported accurately. Then we schedule an energy audit if needed. Some buildings don't need an energy audit. They just need one simple solution to get them across the finish line. Evaluate the results with you and then determine and report the pathway to the DOEE. The deadline to report your pathway in your portal for DOEE is April 1st, 2023. It was 2022. They extended it because of COVID. But that doesn't mean that you need to wait until 2023. Really, by April 1st next year, you should really know what pathway you're taking, what your plans are, at least in the beginning. Simulate the Energy Star score and the EUI score impact based on the ECMs. depending on the energy audit company that you choose, some companies will simulate this for you, others won't. We usually recommend working with one that does, because they understand what your end goal is, and really what you're looking for and how you're going to prioritize these energy conservation measures. So it's very important that you understand, if I'm going to move forward with this project, how is it going to impact my score? Is it going to take me there? Or do I need another project to include in this? Develop a 5-year action plan with the compliance cycle. So as we mentioned several times before, compare and coordinate with service providers and financiers to implement ECMs. So we are consultants. We are not contractors when it comes to actually implementing these projects. However, we do have a competitive bidding process at Honeydew, where we will create an RFP scope of work, send it out, collect the proposals on your behalf, and compare them for you. You're probably all asking, how do we make money if we're not charging for all of this? We would charge the contractor that you move forward with the same sales commission that they pay internally. So since they don't have an internal salesperson handling these accounts, we're taking over that role for them. And instead of paying the internal salesperson, they'll pay us that same commission. And then track the EUI and Energy Star score progress to make sure that you are on your way to complying before the deadline. Now, before we get to the last page, I do know that we have a list of questions. So first from Jimmy Suisa, if we do a data check early, will we then have to comply every 3 years from that point? So we spoke to DOEE about this recently, asking them if we can just move forward with these verifications now. They still haven't completed the guidelines for that. So right now, if you were to confirm something, we would advise that you confirm the square footage of your building. If you don't have any official documents that show this, and you're relying on what the DOE is providing, which they even say might not be accurate, then that's when we recommend you hire an engineer to measure the actual square footage of your building. If you have different space types, make sure that they separate those space types. But that's a great place to start. They didn't recommend starting now, but once they do release the final guidelines on how to verify your building, what energy companies or engineering companies are going to be approved by DOEE, that's when we're going to start recommending that you do that before everybody's doing it in 2024. Now, the next question, we already answered the one about if the scores on the website are accurate. Most likely, most of it's accurate, but we've seen buildings that don't have an accurate score there. How does water consumption play a role with the rating? So I know AZ answered this right after you asked the question, Jimmy. So hot water, so whatever water that uses energy, electricity or gas to heat, that is the water that matters for this program, right? The other water, like in your toilets or just cold water in general, that doesn't need energy to heat, that doesn't matter as much with your Energy Star score. So really you want to focus on the boilers, low flow equipment for your showers, or the sink, because obviously there's hot water in the sink. But really the main thing to focus on are your boilers and domestic hot waters. Can you tell if a building's poor rating is related to a specific utility? That's why we get an energy auditor to determine that. They walk through your building, they look at how old your equipment is, they review all your bills, and they'll put together a nice pretty report that shows you all of this information, so you have a much better understanding. Kind of like a reserve study that's focused only on energy, pretty much, and a lot more details.
And even before that, we can look at what the average building uses. We can compare your building, if it's all electric, to other all electric buildings in the district and say, on on a per square footage basis, you're using 30% more electricity, for example. So we can do an early diagnostic, and then the energy audit can go into a higher level of specificity for that.
Exactly. Now, Aman has an interesting statement. I'm more concerned about other buildings, not ours. Are they reporting accurately, or are they making us look relatively worse? So I'm going to break that down. We are concerned too, because we took over a lot of benchmarking reports this year and last year that were not done accurately. It looked like someone just threw some information in there and didn't double check to make sure everything was right. Didn't have the right energy consumption, the right number of units, square footage, all that type of stuff. So yes, a lot of buildings out there do not have an accurate benchmarking report. DOEE is very concerned, and that's why we're going to have to verify all this data 3 years from now and every 3 years after that. Now, are they making us look relatively worse? If the score was determined by comparing your building to only the buildings in DC, yes. But they're comparing your building to all the different buildings in the country that report the data through Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So the fact that some buildings may have a score that's better than what they really are is not really going to have that much of a direct effect on your score. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if I didn't answer that question.
And that would really come out in the verification, right? Everybody's going to have to have their benchmarking data verified, whether they're subject to BEPS or not. So after everybody's square footage is verified, in terms of the utility data, that's all going to be directly reported by the utility. So there's probably not going to be a lot of changes there. But there could be the case, there's kind of the law of averages where there's going to be some people who overestimate their square footage, some people who underestimate their square footage. And in general, it's probably not going to change too much. And you shouldn't be too concerned about what other people are doing on the Energy Star score side. And in terms of the EUI score, it really doesn't matter what anybody else's EUI score is. Yours is going to be an independent measurement of that level of efficiency.
Great. Now, are there any other? Yep, Steve. So we should pull all the utility invoices for gas, water, and electric and enter the data into the fields found in the DOEE Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and it will calculate our current rating. So there are more steps to that. In Energy Star Portfolio Manager, you have to create an account for your building. You have to answer all the questions regarding the square footage, the different space types in your building, percentage heated and cooled, number of units, number of washer and dryers, list goes on. And then you put the previous year's energy data. And if you are above 50,000 square feet and you haven't done this already, you're going to probably have to do this back to 2019. If there are multiple meters in the building for each utility and they belong to unit owners, right? Who the unit owners are not just going to share all their Pepco bills back from 2019. There's a process in getting that data from at least Pepco and Washington Gas. Water is usually a single meter or a few meters in a building. So after this, feel free to email AZ or myself, and we'd be happy to get into the details of that as well, and possibly help you with your benchmarking. Hopefully that answers your question. So moving forward, Steve just responded. Thanks for providing the specifics. Send a link. Yes, we will be sending a link to the presentation that we recorded to everybody who signed up for this originally.